Welcome to episode 215 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's June 3rd, 1981, Copenhagen, Idrætsparken, a World Cup qualifier, Denmark against Italy. And this should be simple. Italy are one of the great names of world football, two-time World Cup winners, fourth in Argentina in 1978, European Championship hosts in 80, a nation of Zoff, Cirea, Cabrini, Gentile, Tardelli, Antonioni, Conti, Bettega, and Graziani. Denmark are still trying to become Denmark. And then the match ends. Denmark 3, Italy 1. At the time it looked like a shock. In retrospect, it looks like ignition. The spark that lit Danish Dynamite. But how did we get here? For most of the 20th century, Denmark had football talent. What it didn't have was a modern football structure. The national team had Olympic moments. Bronze in 1948, silver in 60, and good performances in the amateur era. But the Danish Football Association clung to amateur ideals for a very long time. For years, turning professional meant becoming unavailable or marginal to the national team. And that meant Danish football repeatedly exported talent and then failed to build a full national side around it. Harald Nielsen, Henning Jensen, Allan Simonsen, players who proved Denmark could produce quality, but also exposed the contradiction. The better you became, the more likely you were to leave. The 1970s start to loosen that world. Denmark begins accepting the reality of professionals abroad, and by 1978, Danish domestic football finally turns professional. In episode 160, we talked about how that even led to Bobby Moore, the captain of England's 1966 World Cup team, ended up in the Danish third tier in April 1978. But habits don't change just because the rules change. The Danish national team still carries the old self-image, happy amateurs, technically gifted, socially relaxed, and not quite serious enough to threaten the elite. Then, in 1979, Denmark hire a German, Sepp Piontek, a former Werder Bremen defender, a coach who had worked in Germany, Haiti, and St. Pauli, disciplined, experienced, dryly funny, and completely unimpressed by Denmark's inferiority complex. He looks at the players and sees the problem. Talent, yes. Belief, not enough. Structure, surely not enough. Professional standards, absolutely not enough. Piontek later said the Danes did not like the word discipline. His job was to make them accept discipline without making them stop being Danish. And that distinction matters, because Denmark didn't become a German team. They became a better Danish team. There was a golden generation emerging. Allan Simonsen, the 1977 Ballon d'Or winner. Frank Arnesen and Søren Lerby, shaped by Ajax and the Dutch football imagination. Preben Elkjær, powerful, chaotic, and brilliant. Morten Olsen, the libero and future brain of the side. Jens Jørgen Bertelsen, Per Røntved, Søren Busk, Jesper Olsen, Jan Mølby, Michael Laudrup soon enough. Not all of them are fully formed yet in 1981, but the ingredients are there. Technique, mobility, courage, foreign club education, and a coach who refuses to let them shrug. The 1982 World Cup qualification group is hard. Italy, Yugoslavia, Greece, and Luxembourg. And Denmark, of course. 2 teams qualify. Denmark begin badly enough that this June night is not really expected to send them to Spain, but it can send them somewhere else, into themselves. The opponent is Italy. Enzo Bearzot's Italy. Dino Zoff is captain and goalkeeper. In front of him, Cabrini, Colovati, Gentile, and Cirea. In midfield, Antonioni, Marini, and Tardelli. Up front, Bettega, Conti, and Graziani. Paolo Rossi is not there yet. His resurrection will come in Spain. But this is still Italy. And Denmark go at them. The first half is tense, but the real explosion comes after the break. Around the hour mark, Denmark strike. Per Røntved, the captain, scores 1-0. Almost immediately, Frank Arnesen scores 2-0. In 2 minutes, the match has changed completely. Italy are not used to being treated like this in Copenhagen. Denmark are not sitting deep, not apologizing for being ambitious, not looking at the badge and asking permission. Italy pull one back through Francesco Graziani. 2-1. And now comes the old Danish test. Do they wobble? Do they become the plucky almost team again? But no. Later on, Lars Bastrup scores the third. 3-1. The final whistle goes and Denmark have beaten Italy. Not in a friendly, not in a youth tournament, but in a World Cup qualifier. Italy still qualify, Denmark don't. But that is not the point. The point is that Denmark have seen the future, and the future is not small. But so what? Well, first, the Italy side that loses in Copenhagen goes on to win the 1982 World Cup. That is the irony. Italy stumbled through the first group stage in Spain with 3 draws. Then Paolo Rossi comes alive. Italy beat Argentina. They beat Brazil 3-2 in one of the most famous matches ever played. Rossi scores a hat-trick. They beat Poland in the semi-final, and then they beat West Germany 3-1 in the final. Zoff lifts the trophy. Tardelli screams. Bearzot becomes immortal. And in World Cup competition, qualifiers plus finals, Italy lose only once between the 1978 third-place match against Brazil and the 1986 round of 16 defeat against France. This match, Denmark 3, Italy 1. That tells you this was not a random night. It was a signal. For Denmark, 1981 becomes the first real proof that Piontek's revolution can work. The Guardian's Great Danish Dynamite retrospective later describes the first signs as Denmark winning 8 out of 9 in 1981, including that rollicking 3-1 over the eventual world champions. The next step comes in September 1982. Bobby Robson's first match as England manager, Denmark against England in Copenhagen. Denmark run England ragged, and Jesper Olsen scores a brilliant late equalizer. Then Wembley, 1983. England need a result, but Denmark win 1-0. Allan Simonsen scores from the penalty spot. More than 80% of Denmark watches it on television. A small football country suddenly understands that it is not pretending anymore. Denmark qualify for Euro 1984. And there, the name, the image, and the mood all arrive. Red and white, fast, technical, and fearless. The hooligans in the stands. The song, Vi er røde, vi er hvide. We are red, we are white. Danish Dynamite. They lose the opener to France, and Allan Simonsen breaks his leg. They respond by beating Yugoslavia 5-0, then come from 2-0 down to beat Belgium 3-2. In the semi-final against Spain, they are minutes, inches, and one Elkjær penalty away from the final. Then 1985, Constitution Day, World Cup qualification again. Denmark 4, Soviet Union 2. Elkjær and Michael Laudrup each score twice. Many Danes still call it the greatest Denmark match ever played. Then Mexico 1986, their first World Cup. They're put in a group with Scotland, Uruguay, and West Germany. And Denmark win all 3. 1-0 against Scotland, 6-1 against Uruguay, 2-0 against West Germany. The world is dazzled. Then Spain again. Denmark is 1-0 up, but then a total blunder. Jesper Olsen backpass. Butragueño snaps it up and equalizes. Denmark fiercely attack, yet they collapse. 5-1. 4 goals by El Butre. The dream breaks, but the imprint remains. Danish Dynamite won nothing. No Euro, no World Cup. And yet it became one of the great cult teams in football history. Because sometimes football remembers not only who lifts trophies, but who changes the imagination. And then comes the long echo. Euro 1988 is a come down. The team is aging. Denmark lose all 3 matches. They miss Italia 1990. Piontek leaves in 1990. A different Denmark, coached by his former assistant Richard Møller Nielsen, his family is called in from the beach in 92 after Yugoslavia are excluded. And Denmark win the European Championship. That story deserves its own episode, and it will get one. Frankly, I can't wait to tell that story. But the roots go back through Piontek, through professionalism, through the foreign-based players. Through the night, Denmark learned to beat giants. And because this episode is being made in 2026, there's one more note. Sepp Piontek passed away earlier this year, aged 85. He didn't win Denmark's trophy in 92, but he built the belief system that made Danish football modern. He took a country with talent and gave it seriousness. He took a group of professionals and gave them a team. He took Danish lightness and added German steel without destroying the joy. And that is why June 3rd, 1981 matters. Not because Denmark qualified, they didn't. Not because Italy collapsed, they became world champions. But it matters because sometimes the revolution announces itself before anyone has a name for it. Before we go, 3 things to take away from June 3rd, 1981. First, Denmark's football awakening was not accidental. It came from structural change, professionalism, foreign club education, and Piontek's insistence on standards. Second, The Italy result was bigger than the table. Denmark didn't reach the 1982 World Cup, but beating the future world champions proved that the ceiling had moved. And third, Danish Dynamite began before the world called it Danish Dynamite. The songs, the shirts, the hooligans, Euro 84 and Mexico 86 came later, but the fuse was lit here. On this day in 1981, Denmark beat Italy 3-1 in Copenhagen, a World Cup qualifier that did not take Denmark to the World Cup, but it announced the coming of a team, a style, and a national football awakening called Danish Dynamite. That is all for episode 215 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. I would be grateful if you'd rate the show 5 stars so the algorithm can push it to new followers every day. And of course, please share. I always want to hear your comments and ideas, so please email me at otd@17lawsguy.com. Tomorrow, we go to June 4, 1950, when the magical Magyars began a 31-match unbeaten streak with a 5-2 win against Poland. Before Hungary became legend, the run had to start somewhere. See you then.